The following program contains the opinions of the host, guests, and call-in participants. These do not necessarily represent the views of this show's distributors or sponsors. This program may contain obscene, profane, or otherwise objectionable language. Viewer discretion is advised. Greetings, people of Earth. Welcome to the interwebs. It's Tuesday night, August 6th, 2024. It's 11 p.m. on the East Coast of the United States, 8 p.m. on West Coast, and I sound kind of weird to me. I don't know if I got, this might help. Okay, there we go. It's 2 o'clock in Singapore. It's 11 a.m. in Singapore. It's 2 o'clock in Sydney, and here where I'm sitting in northeast Minneapolis, Governor Walz's state. It's 10 p.m. Central Daylight Time. I am Jim Peters. Welcome to another edition of Jim Peters Tonight. This is episode number 145, if you're keeping score at home. We got a big show. Big shoe. Yeah, doesn't anyone even remember Ed Sullivan? He went off the air in 1974. That's the actual year. I do remember that. It's like, but whatever. Really big shoes. So what's happening tonight? Our guest is Murray Sabrin. We got two guests. Our guest is Murray Sabrin. He's on tape, economist extraordinaire. He's going to explain to you what happened with the stock market last week and yesterday. Okay? That's cool. Jeff Meyer's also here. He's a CEO and publisher of Conk News. Now, he has an exclusive about Tim Walz, our governor, who's now on the ticket of Kamala Harris. I actually don't know what this is. He gave us a little preview last week. He was on a week or maybe 2 weeks ago. I can't remember now. I think it was last week. And he said that if Governor Walz became the VP pick, he wanted to come on and talk about this. And, of course, that happened. And to everyone's surprise, I mean, basically, no one really expected. Of the three candidates, he was like in third place. He was the dark horse. Nobody really expected this to happen. So Jeff's going to come on in a few minutes and tell us. I'm going to hear this the same way you are. I don't know what he's going to talk about. But it should be fascinating nonetheless. Because the thing is, I know how Conk News works. They don't put out original stories unless they got something relatively important. They were way ahead on the COVID stuff. The shots giving people blood clots. The very famous scientists they had on. Matter of fact, the woman's name was Alicia Powell, if I'm right, was working for Conk News, and she had the last interview with this guy before he passed away. He died suddenly, and Conk News ran. I was working there at the time. We ran the interview, and this guy passed away. But at any rate, I mean, so they don't do this very often. So it's very important that we get this on and we listen to what's going on here. Listen to what Jeff has to say. Let me give you the rundown of what's going on here. I do that. Like I said, tonight it's Murray Sabrin and Jeff Meyer. Tomorrow night, Martin Willis. He is the host of the podcast UFO podcast. And I think we'll have to ask him. Maybe I'm wrong about this, but if I'm right, it's the most popular UFO podcast in America. They've been doing this. It runs once a week on Tuesdays to do a live. And like this show, it's live. It's all over the place. They're on digital radio. I mean, I went to check out the list today. Video, audio, all sorts of crap. They're everywhere. They do it on Tuesday nights live. The really amazing thing, he's been doing this since 2011. And I don't even think podcasts even became a thing till like 2015. So, he's been doing this a long time. It is really amazing. I've talked about this before. People say, well, Joe Rogan's so lucky he's making $100 million a year. Well, here's the deal. Joe Rogan did that podcast for 10 years without seeing a dime of money. 10 years he did it. 10 years and with no income at all. And not only that, he always hired at least one person as a producer. So he's showing out. Him and Corolla. What's Corolla's? First name. I was going to say Andy. It's not. Well, anyway, you know what I'm talking. Adam Carolla. They started about the same time, same deal, same story. They were literally shelling out of their pocket to do these podcasts. They did them for like 10 years and didn't see any money whatsoever. So if you're willing to put your money where your mouth is for 10 years and you're not really going to be ever guaranteed a return, you go right ahead. And you deserve that money. Joe Rogan and Adam Carolla deserve that money as far as I'm concerned. That's my story. So anyway, Martin Willis tomorrow. Thursday, David Strom, and that will be interesting too because David has written a bunch of articles about Tim Walz. I mean, basically, so here's the deal. David lives in town. He lives in Minneapolis too, so he's got firsthand knowledge of this. As does Jeff. As do I. Ed Morrissey also writes for Hot Air. He's been a regular guest on here too. He's the editor of Hot Air, the managing editor. He used to live here, so we all know Tim Walz. I won't say up close and personal, although I have actually met the guy. I was in a government meeting with him, and it was a face-to-face thing. I mean, I did talk to him, and I have to say, and I told. I was working for Jeff Meyer at the time, and I told him this. He made a pretty good impression. I have to say, personally, he actually did. Now, I can't say the same thing of Keith Ellison, the Attorney General of the state of Minnesota, who was also in that meeting, and that guy came off as the biggest jackass I've ever met in my life. He comes off bad on television anyway. He even came off worse in real life. I mean, I wouldn't trust that guy as far as I could throw him. I mean, I cannot tell you. I've been around few people in my life, and I've been around way more people than most people. I've been around few people who made a worse first impression. I mean, seriously, I got nothing good to say about this guy. Nothing. I hope he loses a re-election. Walz was different. I was personally impressed with him. But that said, he's a freaking socialist. I mean, he is. I mean, you can't get around it. They have Ron DeSantis said this today. They have by far the most liberal ticket that's ever run for president in the United States ever. No doubt about it. I mean, Tim Walz, and I'm sure Jeff will illuminate on this, Tim Walz is actually to the left of Kamala Harris, and that's pretty damn hard to do. So anyway, David's coming on Thursday. We don't do Fridays here at all. Monday, Jeff Shepard, and this is going to be really fascinating. I'm really looking forward to talking to this guy. He has written 3 books on the Watergate affair and Nixon resigning from the presidency, and he's got a movie, a documentary on it coming out in I think a couple weeks. It comes out either next week or the week after, and we just happened to get him the timing. We didn't know that when we booked him. The timing just happened to be perfect. We booked him just before his documentary comes out. He's got a really, really fascinating theory. I talked about this last night. I'm going to talk about it here again. His theory is that the whole Watergate affair from beginning to end was a giant setup to get Richard Nixon out of office. So it was a basically controlled manipulation. And my question is, I don't understand how you can do that, because the way the actual break-in to the Watergate Hotel actually went down. That's the part I don't get. The whole thing would be predicated on the fact that they would get caught. And what if they didn't get caught? Although I just learned this in studying for this interview, and very few people know this. I certainly didn't know this. That was actually the second time they busted into the Democratic National Headquarters. They had done it about a week before that, and they went back ostensibly because they said one of the wiretaps failed, and they wanted to replace it. They didn't get caught the first time; they got the second time. So, what were they just going to keep doing it until they got caught? Was that the idea? I don't know. But anyway, Jeff Shepard supposedly has the answers. We're going to talk to him. We're taking the rest of next week off: Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So call us tonight. You can call us with the little ticker on the bottom of the screen here. You can call us with your webcam. You go to jimandnight.com/call. Press the big blue button at the top of the page. You can call us on your phone, 563-999-3435. Talk to the sexy British lady at Blog Talk Radio. And you can text us in real time, 408-458-5088. And that's going to be run at the bottom of the screen the entire time. Murray Sabrin's interview is taped. We taped that at 3:00 this afternoon, but Jeff Meyer is live. And so, like I said, I do not know what Jeff's going to talk about. And so we're going to put him on first. But first, I'm going to show you the front page of Kong News right now because they're our sponsor. And we're very proud to have that. This is the front page in real time. I can't read. I'm losing my. I can't my eyesight. I'm losing my hearing. It's all going to hell. Jesus, it's the beginning of the end. But my mother just had her 100th birthday, so we'll see. Three out of the 4 of my grandparents lived over the age of 98. So I don't know what to tell you. I might be around for a while. And so I'm just gonna, and as an aside, so my mother just moved into an assisted living facility for the first time, literally last week at the age of 100. We had our 100th birthday party, and the next week she moves. Okay. So I'm talking to the people who run this facility. It's actually a very nice facility. I would have no trouble living there. None. But they said there's like 56 people living there, and 9 of them are over the age of 100. And what the woman told me, she said the problem with this is that no matter how affluent you are, how wealthy, no one expects to live that long. So almost everybody blows out of their money. And I thought, well, that makes sense. Yeah. It doesn't matter how much money you had. No one expects, you're 80, you just turned 80. Or can you imagine Joe Biden just turned 81? Can you imagine him living 20 more years? No, but it happens. And my mother's actually in relatively good health. She's actually like walking around and stuff. She doesn't use a wheelchair or hover around or any of that stuff. So I don't know. Who knows? But anyway, why did I bring that up? I don't even know. I can't, because I said I can't read this. But yeah, I actually can't. I'm sorry. I cannot read the type on the screen. But Conk is a news aggregator. So the way this works is that it's kind of like the Drudge Report, except it's automated. And normally automation is bad, but in this case, it's a really good thing. So what happens is that the servers from Conk News go out onto the internet and go to 75 different news sources and grab all the new stories every 3 hours. And then they bring them back in, they parse them, they make them, make the entries look pretty, and they post them all on the front page in chronological order. But here's the real secret sauce here. Like most news aggregators will actually they will list the articles from every news source separately. Like you have the top 10 from Fox News, you get the top 10 from Breitbart, that sort of stuff. Conk mixes them all together. So they're in chronological order regardless of the source, which is fantastic because then you're getting the latest news at the top, no matter where it's from. That's the coolest thing. So they're listed on the front page in reverse chronological order, newest at the top. If you click on a photo or click on a headline, and the photos are from the articles, and the headlines are not rewritten, they're from the articles too. You go directly to that article. There's no interstitial page, no ad, no homepage, none of that crap. You go right to the article. This is as close, if you're an old fart like me, this is as close to a traditional newspaper as you can get online. It's fantastic. And here's the real great thing. Not only do you not have to pay, not only is it free, you don't have to log in, you don't have to register, you don't have to subscribe, none of that crap. You just go there. It's at conk.com. Or they just got the redirect running, conk.news too. Conk.news or conk.com, conk.com. Either one work. Try that out. And we're going to put Jeff Meyer on here, and I'm going to run 12 seconds of bumper music, and you will like. Hello, sir.
Good evening.
How are you?
All is well.
You're in.
We might get rid of Walz.
What was that?
We might get rid of Walz.
Yeah, we might.
Be going to Washington, baby.
Yeah. Actually, I hope not. But
right. Yeah, that was Dr. Vladimir Zelenko. Who Alicia had interviewed just weeks before he passed away suddenly.
I think it was a week or two before he passed away.
Yeah.
And she had the last interview with him, if I'm right, too.
Yeah, and he was really a cutting-edge doctor on what these shots were doing to people because of his background. So
It was amazing because he was pulling, and then 6-9 months, a year later, they started finally talking about this. He was pulling all these giant blood clots out of people, and they were showing them, and it almost looked like science fiction shit. I mean, it was unbelievable.
Looked like a tapeworm coming out of someone's veins, not out of their stomach.
It was awful. It was awful.
It was crazy. So anyway, thank you for having me on tonight. I'm not a journalist. I just, things that intrigue me and the people I get to talk to throughout the day and years is where this kind of stuff really hits me as as a citizen of the United States, as a taxpayer in Minnesota, just how artificial these politicians are. So let me just give you a little bit of background on Tim Walz. So he was born in 1964 in Nebraska. He's been our governor. This is his second term. Minnesota had a $17 billion surplus at the end of COVID. It's totally gone. We run a deficit now. So $17 billion for a population of 6 million people. How that math works, why we aren't burning the Capitol down or rioting in the streets for just the lack of
results,
expression with the money, They had a windfall and they blew it. So in 1996, Tim Walz moved to Mankato, Minnesota, and he taught social studies. I got involved in a project a few years ago that was related to the U.S.-Dakota War of 1862. So in September of 28th of 1862, there was an uprising down near Mankato, Minnesota.
Yeah.
And basically the Indians were told, you should surrender. We got to stop this, which they did. The Indians that they had arrested, so on November 5th of 1862, this commission that was put in place figured they had 392 prisoners tried, 303 were sentenced to death, 16 were given prison terms. So the governor of Minnesota at that time was Henry Sibley.
Mm-hmm.
President Lincoln, now this is a year into the Civil War, says, hold on here. Send me those cases so myself and the government lawyers can review them. So they sent the trial transcripts, obviously by rail, from Minnesota to Washington to be reviewed. Excuse me, I'm still fighting this bug I picked up in Africa. As Lincoln was going through these, they only found 2 men that were guilty of rape. So Lincoln expanded the criteria to include those who participated in massacres of civilians rather than just battles. He then made his final decision and forwarded a list of 39 names to Sibley back in Minnesota. And so then they had decided they were going to hang these 39 Indians at 10 a.m. the morning of December 26th, 1862. So the day after Christmas. They had erected scaffolding in the town, and they led these prisoners up onto the scaffolding for the execution. They basically a single person took an axe and cut the rope, and all were hung instantly.
Yeah, simultaneously.
There was 4,000 spectators there. Some of the interesting things of the history of this is Colonel Stephen Miller was charged with keeping the peace in Mankato that day. He declared martial law, and I thought this was interesting. He banned the sale and consumption of alcohol within 10 miles the 10-mile radius of the town. So they knew there was going to be more trouble. One of the things that the Dakota Sioux did when they got up onto the scaffolding is they embraced their hands. So 38 guys standing there and they were holding hands. And if you've ever seen Dances with Wolves, their tradition is they will yell each other's name to each other when they're going to pass into the afterlife so they can find each other when they get across there. So I would yell Jim and you would yell Jeff and I would yell Murray. And so these guys were chanting their names before the platform dropped away from them.
Jeff, this when you say the town, did the hanging happen in Mankato too?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. This all happened in Mankato. I verified it today because I trust the Google.
You're brave.
In April of 1863, Minnesota voided its treaties with the Dakota and sent those living in the camps to Nebraska. And then soon after that, Congress passed legislation making it illegal for a Dakota to live in Minnesota. And that remains the law today. As I was working on this project, that struck me as, hold on here, we have a governor from Mankato who is a social studies teacher, whose lieutenant governor in Minnesota is Peggy Flanagan, and she's a Chippewa Indian with the White Earth tribe.
Yeah.
And so these two could have resolved this the first day they became the governor and lieutenant governor in Minnesota.
And when you say resolve, are you talking about like forgiveness, or what are you talking about?
They could have gotten rid of this law
about Dakota Indians?
About the Dakota Indians.
Uh-huh.
And that is what, when I think of politicians, and I think of these politicians that sit there and say, we're going to help the minorities, we're going to help the American Indian. These guys that's just for a vote. And when they get into power, none of this stuff is resolved. Donald Trump, a businessman who says, I know the system's rigged. I used it. These guys use it too. He got in there and started to change this stuff that affected everyday Americans. You take this Tim Walz in any one of his ilk, and this stuff history is just forgotten once your ballot is cast.
Yeah.
And these guys are elected. And to me, those are the small stories that people need to understand about Tim Walz. This guy is the biggest opportunist. There's going to be stuff coming out about his military service, what he claims he did, what he claims he didn't do. And that's what people have to, if you want to be able to discuss intelligently with someone that thinks Tim Walz will make a good vice president and that ticket means success for the American people, you have to look at what he didn't do in the case with his lieutenant governor, didn't resolve something 162 years ago. And if you read what happened in these trials, there were two guys that shouldn't have been up there. They volunteered. It's a shit show of our history.
Yeah, I know that. Right.
And we have to correct that stuff so we don't repeat it. Because if you forget your history, you repeat it.
There's another thing we need to point out here too, and that is it would have been probably 5 or 6 minutes of work on his part to do this. He could have told an aide, write this up, bring it back to me. I proofread it and then I sign it. It was as simple as that. There's nothing. There's no effort involved here.
No, 100%. They control both bodies, all three branches of the government in Minnesota.
Yeah,
they could have made a statement. This wasn't right. We don't like bringing up our bad past, but we need to address it. Otherwise, it's an open, festering wound.
Yeah.
And, that's a glimpse into Tim Walz. I don't know how much you've talked about Liz Collins' news documentary, The Fall of Minneapolis.
Not a little bit.
If you haven't seen it, to your listeners and viewers, go out there on YouTube. You can find it. Liz Collins is a local news anchor. She's independent now. She works for Alpha News, a great independent news source. And they put an hour and 20-minute documentary together about the fall of Minneapolis, how George Floyd's deal started and what fell into place and was wrong and the governor didn't correct. And you can make your own judgment from what you saw on the regular news, which is a big lie. And they're just part of this government cover-up and the mouthpiece to keep everyone arguing with each other. And then you have news journalists like Liz Collins. They just are going to show you the timeline from the time Floyd walked into that little grocery store and was accused of trying to buy something with a fake $20 bill.
Yes, from what I understand, I haven't seen it, but from what I understand, her contention is that Derek Chauvin did not kill George Floyd, right?
The first medical examiner said he died from the drugs in his system.
Right.
He was either going to die under, whether Chauvin was kneeling on him or not.
Yeah. Right.
He was not going to make it to the end of that.
And also,
day.
supposedly, they have on body cam footage, he was bitching about not being able to breathe well before they put him on the ground, like 5-10 minutes before that. It's like he was in the back of a squad car complaining about not being able to breathe. And that's because the guy, you know, he's on drugs. On top of that, he had heart problems. He was just a mess.
Yeah, he was right. He wasn't healthy. But anyways, that's the stuff you're going to have to get up to speed on so you can have a intelligent conversation with people that think the Harris-Walz ticket is good for your future, for your kids' future, your grandchildren's future. They aren't.
Nothing could be worse.
They picked this gal not through any kind of electoral system. They just anointed her. And now the media is behind them. And, you know, Trump's going to have to be on his A game every day, because if he steps in it, it's going to come back and really affect the country in a negative way.
You're in the news business, and this is the problem we have. And I'll just explain. There's a woman I follow on Substack named Sasha Stone, and she lives in Hollywood, and she's a former Hollywood liberal that actually ditched the whole thing. And so she has a really interesting take on it. So, but I'm reading her latest column, but what I was really interested in is the comments below. And people are talking about trying to convince their friends and relatives that the mainstream media is full of shit, and and with limited success. Some of them did and some of them didn't. And although right now there does seem to be about half of the public that's figured out the game, the other half hasn't, and it's really terrible. I mean, I don't know. I've talked to you about this before about, I've tried to explain to some of my friends about how they're being lied to constantly, and most of them just refuse to believe it. They think I'm the one who's full of shit.
Yeah, and for those, you just got to walk past them, right? I mean, if they're that adamant about being naive, there's nothing you can do about it. But they're in the minority. They're 10% of the population. The people you want to talk to about what Tim Walz could have done and didn't, because it wasn't politically, he had already been elected. Why would I worry about something that happened in 1862? Well, because it was wrong and it needs to be corrected.
Yeah.
In a business, you fix your problems. In government, you just move on and just let them linger. And so that's the big difference people get torn between is, well, why wouldn't they fix that? Well, they don't need any reason to fix it once they're elected.
Right.
They'll talk about it till the election day. Once they win, and look at our economy.
Well, yeah, look at our economy, because the thing is, I mean, I really feel strongly about this. If these people win, our economy will become a catastrophe. I mean, we're halfway there already, you know?
Oh, yeah, we're more than halfway. And the thing is, today, if you listen, they would say the stock market rebounded 220 points. Well, if I give you $1,000 and you give me $220 back,
Yeah.
I'm supposed to be happy?
Well put.
And that's just between Monday and Tuesday. Friday, it went down 600.
That's right. I know.
So now I'm down $1,400.
That's right. You're down $1,400, and you should be happy.
Yes, it rebounded. It did not rebound.
Yeah.
It did not rebound. And there's going to be more and more trouble because Japan had problems that they're trying to flush through the system.
There's too much knowledge in the financial world now for us to have a crash like in 1929 and 20% in one day. That's not going to happen.
They'll just shut it off for the day and say, "Hey, we'll see you tomorrow."
That's right. But it's going to go down 300 points every day for like 60 days in a row. That's the way it'll happen. You know?
Correct. And again, the top 1% doesn't give a shit at all what the stock market does. They're winning on the up and the down.
That's right.
But if you have a 401k or some kind of retirement vehicle in this thing, in 58 years, this will be the third time it's basically going to go into half the value.
Yeah, right.
And they'll say, well, it comes back.
Oh, yeah. In another 30 years.
It comes back, but it's still half of what it could have been.
Yeah, right.
You know, and this whole NVIDIA thing and, their AI chips aren't going to be out on time and all this stuff. In business, you may run your accounting software to run your business. If the power goes out, you open a drawer and you pull out the old 3-part forms. And you say, well, until that thing comes back, we're going to write them on this.
Right.
Because we're not shutting down because Microsoft shit the bed.
Yeah.
We still need to do commerce. No one's coming to save us.
Yeah. I don't know if you know this, Jeff. I reported this, that it was either Monday or Friday. All of the consumer stock trading services all went kaput. Ameritrade, Charles Schwab, all of them.
They weren't going to let you sell.
Well, no, that's right. That's
why
I brought it up. Right.
You got it. You got it. And I've heard you pitch this guy that's coming on Monday about, that was the second time they were in to fix a bug that was broke. Well, my guess is the CIA went in there and dismantled the bug so they would come back. Because when they looked at the flow chart, it was, we got to get them caught. They need to be discovered.
That's right.
And so there just isn't, you can't trust this government. And I'm not saying you can trust the Trump administration with a blind faith. But the thing is, they'll have the flashlight back up Trump's ass looking for anything possible. And it's never been even brought into the room where Joe Biden, Kamala Harris's administration is.
Yeah.
And that's why we're at where we're at. And that's why people don't trust the media, and they shouldn't.
What's the guy, Mr. Wonderful O'Leary from, Shark Tank,
Yeah,
he was on Fox Business today saying the fact that people really have to, the same thing we're talking about. He said people have to understand that if we elect these people, there's going to be a catastrophic failure of the American economy. And there will be. He's absolutely right.
Yeah. I mean, if you compare what Kamala Harris talks about and what Justin Trudeau just to the north of us does, there's a lot of similarities to her approach and what he has done in Canada.
Yeah.
So, Tim Walz, I'm asking your listeners and viewers to check out the Dakota War of 1862. And that this guy taught social studies in the town happened in. He's got a lieutenant governor who's a Chippewa Indian, and they never thought to address getting rid of these old laws.
Yeah.
Because it just wasn't convenient. They're still wrong, and Tim doesn't give a shit. He's on to bigger and better, and he will wreck your life.
Yeah, so they did that rally in Philadelphia this afternoon, and I'm watching this, and well, apparently Walsh actually started the thing about J.D. Vance being weird. Apparently that was, so I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, well, he's kind of a dork. And then I'm driving around the afternoon, and Joe Peg says on the radio, he says, no, he's not a dork. He's a doofus. I thought that's right.
Yeah.
That's better. He's a doofus.
He's a doofus with a sport coat and jeans on, and he thinks he's, 40 years old instead of 60.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I do.
But you have class.
Oh yeah. Right. I'm classy. Yeah. Everyone's
so anyway, that's what Conk News is thinking about. You got to get up to speed, folks. You got to be able to have a calm discussion about what these people are actually going to do.
And the fact is, it's what they want to do is in virtually nobody's actual self-interest. That's the thing.
Correct.
If you look at this, I know there's a whole bunch of people who are like just lathered up over the fact, well, she's pretty and, and she's like, she's kind of personable. Well, she can't do anything. I mean, first of all, she's really, really stupid. I have no problem saying that at all. She's very stupid, and she has no organizational skills whatsoever. I mean, she's a person who has no skills at all. And we're talking about her becoming president. It's nuts. Absolutely
and
nuts.
The same people that were running Joe will have a much easier time running her because she's afraid of a microphone without a teleprompter.
Yeah. And actually, she's more malleable than he is. And
100, for sure.
That's saying something, because he's not exactly any sort of Einstein either. I mean, Christ.
Yeah. And hey, does Israel get nuked tonight or tomorrow?
Yeah, really. Tell me about it. I mean, I actually think that could happen before the election. Iran.
Iran has said that within 48 hours they're doing something.
Yeah, I know. It's terrible.
And again, the Mossad was in that guy's bedroom, 9 hours before he put his head down on that pillow.
Yeah.
And they planted that little bomb so it'd take him out and his bodyguard and didn't kill anyone else in the house. So it wasn't a rocket that came flying in there. It was planned to eliminate that guy.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
It's easy for me to say, but you guys should actually write the story up and put it on the front page.
Yeah, I'm trying to talk to our favorite journalist, and I got to email her tomorrow and see if she can write it in a way better way. So
excellent. Thank you, Jeffrey. Always a pleasure.
Thank you.
You know that. Yeah, I'll see you.
Have a good evening.
Jeffrey Meyer, the CEO and publisher of Conk News, CONK.com, CONK.news, either one. So that was really interesting, and he's right. You should, even if you're not from Minnesota, you should look a little bit about this Indian uprising, because these people were really, really screwed. It's really terrible, and he's right. Walz could have fixed this for history in like 5-10 minutes. Didn't even occur to them. So, and David Strom is coming on Thursday. We'll have more to talk about it then, because he has a whole bunch of shit to say about this. He does not like Tim Walz at all, but I can really want to reiterate what Jeff and I were talking about just a second ago, and that is these people can't come into power because they will just you can talk all you want about where you're at on the spectrum of abortion or free lunches for kids or all that sort of stuff. Fine. That's not the point. The point is these people will destroy the American economy. I mean, catastrophically. They're already doing it. I mean, the gaslighting that's been going on over the last 2-3 years about their economic Bidenomics has been hilarious because we are on the verge now of a major recession. And even if we weren't, the fact of the matter is our people have been getting hosed for 3 years. And like Jeff said, if you're affluent, you don't notice. The one top third of the country does not really notice this. They don't. They have enough money so that they can go to the grocery store and they don't really care whether prices go up. But the bottom 2/3 of people in America are getting killed. Now, I should have brought this up because Jeff's always kidding me about he calls Bill O'Reilly my boyfriend. But I was watching Bill O'Reilly's newscast a couple nights ago, and he was talking about the fact he was talking about this too. That same message about the fact that economically we can't let these people win. And he said, I never thought about this point, and we got Murray Sabrin's coming on in a minute, and he's going to be talking about the same thing about what happened with the stock market, all this sort of stuff. It's a fascinating discussion. Murray comes on it regularly, about once every 6-8 weeks. But this is one of the best interviews we've ever done with him. But Bill O'Reilly said, you have to understand, we live in a consumer economy. The American economy exists primarily because Americans like to spend money. And the problem, as far as like this recession thing goes, is Americans are running out of money to spend. And he's absolutely right. That's exactly what's going on here. We are running out of money to spend. And so at some point, I know that, people are, they go to the grocery store and they buy a less expensive loaf of bread to save money. Well, what happens when you don't have any money to buy bread? What happens then? Well, shit. I mean, we're really, really close to this whole thing economically collapsing. I mean, I didn't even say closer than 2008. And and my friends who watch the show say I'm fear-mongering. I'm not. I really think it's very simple. You can't print this much money and not have bad things happen. And Murray brings us up in the interview about the fact that, well, when Trump did it too, and he did. That's true. Between Trump and Biden, we have added in 8 years $17 trillion to the national debt. However, Biden has added way more than Trump, and Trump added a lot. So that goes to show you. So it's not that the Republicans are completely innocent here, not at all. But these people have gone to town, and the thing is, if Kamala Harris does even half the stuff she says she wants to do, we will bankrupt the whole system. It's as simple as that. And of course, they kind of want that. They want total chaos in the country so that they can rebuild the country in their image. It's like then if everyone's hurting, well, the American government has to step in and bail everybody out. And then you have socialism. So, yeah, you may think I'm nuts. I don't care. I just think, in my mind, that's what's we're on the road to here. So, all right, we're going to play the interview with Murray Sabrin right now. Here we go. Joining us from his home in Naples, Florida, economist extraordinaire, former professor. You're the current professor emeritus at Ramapo College. You're a former professor, but you're current professor emeritus. Do I have that right?
That's correct, Jim.
And longtime author, Murray Sabrin. I'm so glad to see you again.
Great to be with you, Jim, on one of my important days of my life.
Yeah, it's the 75th anniversary of you immigrating to the United States.
Long time ago, Jim, when the world was a lot different than it was today, right after World War II, when Europe was in ruins, Russia was in ruins, Japan was in ruins, and the United States was trying to make the world safe for democracy. And that's why we got NATO and all these other alliances. And so the world has changed incredibly since I arrived here on August 6, 1949, with my parents and older brother. And
how old were you?
I was 2.5. I was, I guess, still running around making mayhem. I don't remember any of it, but sailing across the Atlantic, my father said I was clinging on to him in the ship for a week.
Yeah, you came by boat.
Absolutely. I mean,
Oh,
we didn't have much money back then. I think my father told me he arrived in America with $150 in his pocket.
All right, I got to do some quick math. What year was this then?
1949.
Yeah, I don't even know if there were any transatlantic flights in 1949.
If there were very few and far between, and they were probably very expensive. So
Yeah.
we sailed out of West Germany, and it took us, I think, 7 to 8 days to get here. So I guess we left at the end of July and got here on August 6th on a very hot day. And my father, not knowing what the weather was like, was wearing a heavy wool coat. And so that was a big shock to him that the weather was not what he thought it was. And so living on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, like a lot of Holocaust survivors and Jewish immigrant families from around the world. We lived in a one-bedroom railroad apartment with a bathroom in the hallway, and that was my introduction to America.
You know, we didn't plan on talking about this at all, but since you kind of touched on it now, you're talking about all the changes in the country. You know, the thing that really amazes me most is the re-arrival of anti-Semitism. Like, I don't understand this at all. How stupid are we?
Well, I think what's happened, Jim, and this is very important, being Jewish and a Holocaust survivor, a survivor of Holocaust, a son of Holocaust survivors. I think what's happened is the state of Israel being, quote, the Jewish homeland. And if you're opposed to the policies of the Israeli government, people ipso facto make you anti-Semitic. And people think if you're Jewish, you're automatically a supporter of Israel. And people have criticized Israel's policies in Gaza. There have been horrible reports of the IDF, Israel Defense Forces, really violating the Geneva Convention regarding the targeting of civilians in their attempt to root out Hamas in Gaza. And so what you have is, unfortunately, a state that claims to be a religiously based, supposedly a democracy, and people are conflating all these things. And so what you're getting is the spillover effect of, if Israel was a secular nation and doing what they were doing now, I don't think there would be, quote, anti-Semitism the way we have it today. So there's a lot of problems with what's going on in the Mideast. And I was thinking of writing a piece for my Substack. Was the creation of a Jewish state a mistake? Because once you have a state based upon a religious foundation, then if that state does something that people disagree with or engages in activities like we see in Gaza that people criticize, and not only in the United States, but all over the world, then I think the state, in this case, Israel, is going to have a lot of blowback in terms of people criticizing it. And since it's a Jewish state, then people who are affiliated with Israel, whether they're Jewish, you get a lot of, quote, anti-Semitic feeling toward Jewish people. And that's why it's very hard to have a civil discourse about Israel and the Palestinians, because the point I've made over the years is, if Israel is this wonderful liberal democracy in the Mideast, why doesn't it incorporate the Palestinians in Israel, in the political life of Israel and the economic life of Israel, and then have a real diversified, multi-ethnic, multi-religious society? And I think that's the challenge. I think the two-state solution is a no-starter. I don't think that's going to happen. I think the only way you're going to have peace in the Mideast, especially in Israel, is if you have the Palestinian population become part of the Israeli society with all the rights and privileges that Israeli citizens and Arab citizens have in Israel. I think that's the only way to go. Otherwise, Israel was formed a year before we got to America in 1948, and my parents could have gone to Israel, but they didn't, because my father spent 5 years fighting off the Nazis in Poland in World War II. 5 years out of his life, Jim. And so he had enough of war, and he didn't want to see his children go to war. And so that's why they came to the United States and carved out a life here.
That is one of the most interesting ideas I've heard in a long time, about the fact that the two-state solution is not the solution. The solution is to invite the Palestinians into Israel. That's I mean that's like stupidly unique. I mean I mean that as a compliment. I mean that's really amazing. I've never thought of that.
Again, if Israel is the great democracy in the Mideast, then it should have the ability to say we are in favor of everyone who lives in the area be part of Israeli society. And I think that's the challenge. Unfortunately, from what I've been reading, and I'm no expert on the Mideast, is that Netanyahu wants to rid Israel of Palestinians. And that's a real problem because that's why people have called it genocide. And this is why there's so much angst toward Netanyahu and the Israeli government and the IDF of what they're doing in Gaza. And so there are people writing on Substack and other non-traditional media about the atrocities that are going on. I just read that, again, I don't know if it's true or not, but someone has written about this on Substack, that the IDF is targeting doctors, shooting doctors in Gaza to prevent them from treating the Palestinians who've been injured during the hostilities. If that's the case, then these are war crimes according to the Geneva Convention.
Yeah.
So again, I don't think the American media are doing a good job in reporting what's going on. You're seeing a lot of reporting on Substack with people who have been longtime journalists or who are analysts of the Mideast. And so that's why I'm really educating myself about what's going on there and try to get a handle as to what's happening. But ever since I became aware of what's going on in Israel with the '67 war, that when I was a college student, that's nearly 60 years ago, I said, why can't they all get together and just have one Israeli government with all the different ethnic and religious groups enjoying the benefits of living together in peace and harmony and prosperity?
There's a lot of people, especially like even the congressman from my district, and there's people in Congress who say, no, we're not anti-Semitic, we're anti-Zionist, But your point is that people conflate that constantly, and they do. I don't think people can even keep it straight. I want to change the subject here really quick, though.
Sure.
You and I have been involved in the media. You were a talk show host for many years. We've been either talking to the media or in the media like forever. And you're talking about the American media not covering this correctly. The American media right now just sucks. I just can't put it any more bluntly. I just and you share my opinion here or not?
Oh, absolutely. I stopped watching. I used to watch ABC News at night for decades, and I stopped watching a couple of years ago because I felt that they weren't reporting accurately on COVID. There were no dissenting voices about the shot and the protocols that the CDC was promulgating regarding COVID. And there were no dissenting voices. And when you don't have dissenting voices in my field in academia, you want to hear different points of view on every subject under the sun. And if the media won't allow that, Fox News, for example, is the same thing with what's going on in Ukraine and Israel. There are no dissenting voices as to what's going on in Ukraine and Israel. So I've lost confidence in the media. I get my news from different sources online, and I read the Wall Street Journal. I read the local Naples paper and try to get as much information as I can. I speak to as many people as I can, email them. And there are a lot of smart people who do great work.
That's true.
Seymour Hersh, the journalist that uncovered the My Lai massacre. He has a Substack column. He writes some great stuff about foreign policy. And why isn't he on Fox and MSNBC and CNN? I used to watch CNN and MSNBC in the years ago when they were news outlets. Now they're basically opinion pieces. And I know what the left is thinking. I've been living with them for 60 years. The left just wants more and more power in Washington or the state capitol. And so I just tune them out because they obviously haven't learned anything about the world we live in and human nature. And so that's why I'm doing what I'm doing with Substack, and now with my new venture called Money Clips Enterprises, which should be up and running in the not too distant future, where I'll be offering courses and podcasts. And it's going to be a great platform for me to interview people, to promote my own ideas about free markets and limited government and being a constitutional republic and a non-interventionist foreign policy and monetary policy, things that we need to get out to the American people so they're better informed than what we have today.
Well, just an aside, and we were talking about this before we even went on the air, when Money Clip Enterprises starts, you let me know. We'll come on and you can we'll do an interview just about that.
Terrific. I really appreciate it, because the principals involved are very excited about all the people that they brought in to offer courses and podcasts, because there's just a lack of good information out there. And I think with my background, my personal background, my academic background, and what I've accomplished over the last half century, and especially the last few years in writing books. I mean, my first book will be 30 years old, believe it or not, in January, on how to create a tax-free America. And when you present the ideas very fundamentally that we can have a tax-free America, and I show people how we can transition from the big government we have today to a prosperous society with less conflict, more harmony than what we have today. Because certainly what we have today, the welfare warfare state, is certainly not in the best interest, long-term interest, or short-term interest of the American people.
Well, Murray, I have to ask you though, you just retired from full-time teaching like 3 or 4 years ago, right?
Yeah, 4 years ago.
Yeah, 4 years ago. Okay. The problem with the media is that we're basically now, I mean, there's a lot of people who will be very blunt and say colleges have become indoctrination camps, at least for journalism. Do you think that's true? Is that the reason everyone in journalism seems to be a left-wing activist? I mean, that seems to be the impression. Is that coming from college or not?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, in a business school, you're teaching very technical subjects, so there's not much place for a professor to bring in ideological issues. But I'll give you one example. When I taught a finance course maybe 10, 15 years ago, one of the students from the Middle East, I forgot how we got on the subject, but he said one of his professors said how wonderful socialism is. And he raised his hand and said, listen, I lived under a socialistic in a socialist country. It really is terrible. So how can you say socialism is good? And so I give him credit for challenging what the professor was saying in terms of socialist ideas being a wonderful way to organize society. And this is the problem with people who really don't do a deep dive in the subject, don't do the reading that's out there that's critical of socialism, that's been around for 150 years, from Bastiat writing the law that was published in 1850, 170 years ago, to all the other critiques that have been around. And so you just realize that people are not well educated when it comes to these fundamental issues about how to organize society, socialism versus the mixed economy, which we have, or a laissez-faire economy, which I've been advocating for decades, which is the most conducive to human nature, where no one can use force to achieve their goals. I mean, it's just a very simple principle. That's why there are criminals. Criminals use force to achieve their goals. Yeah. In America, the government is the major criminal, because they use taxes and regulation and bludgeon people if you don't agree to what they want to do. For example, the vaccine mandates. I mean, you were either ostracized, you couldn't go to work, you couldn't travel if you weren't vaccinated. That goes against every constitutional principle we have of individual autonomy. And so that's why the last few years has been an eye-opener to a lot of people, that the government has basically taken over healthcare in many ways, and that we've got to challenge that. That's why I've written 2 books on healthcare. And so we can have a much better healthcare system, a medical care system, at a fraction of what we're paying today. We're paying nearly $5 trillion a year for medical care, and the American people are sicker than ever. So what does that tell you? Money doesn't buy good health. It's lifestyle, it's good food, it's exercise, it's sunshine. It's the things that most doctors don't tell their patients about. They just say, okay, you have this problem, here's a pill for it, here's a prescription for it. And they just address the symptoms instead of the underlying causes.
And you're not actually, that's not hyperbole there. I just read a report about how the fact that Americans are sicker than ever. And I know that for the first time in like a zillion years, the life expectancy in the United States has actually dropped, which is amazing considering that,
Well, COVID and the shot particularly. I mean, that people have been writing about how harmful this thing is, that it causes blood clots and heart disease and can trigger all sorts of other illnesses. And there are people writing about it, but you never see this in the mainstream media because the pharmaceutical companies are responsible for about 50% of the advertising revenue on cable TV and traditional TV. So you cannot criticize big pharma and be on these shows because they just won't put you on.
No. Well, I had you come on today to talk about what happened. I mean, it's Tuesday, the 6th, August 6th, to talk about what's happened on the markets the last few days, especially because, I mean, there's a zillion articles being written in the press right now about how all of a sudden, very suddenly, people are saying, oh my God, we might have a recession after all. And like you said, you're not the only person who said, no, it's already started. We're in one. And I basically wanted to just touch base with you because you've been predicting that we would have a recession before the end of 2024 for like 2 years. So it appears that maybe you were right.
Well, the thing is, a recession comes about because of the cheap money policies of the Federal Reserve, of depressing interest rates, which creates speculation in housing and the stock market and other markets. And those prices get elevated, which are not natural. They're not based upon organic supply and demand, if you will. And so prices correct, workers get laid off, companies restructure in order to get back to a sustainable prosperity, as opposed to this goose prosperity created by the Federal Reserve. And so what we're seeing, a recession is basically an adjustment to the previous cheap money policies of the Federal Reserve. So a recession is not to try to combat, it's to let it unfold so you can get rid of the excesses that took place during the previous boom. That's why I wrote Navigating the Boom Bust Cycle, Jim, and that explains how this process unfolds and which sectors of the economy are most affected. And if you're an entrepreneur, how you can benefit during a recession as opposed to closing up shop. Because if you're a good entrepreneur, you can get a sense of what's working and what's not working in terms of the economy and how you can take advantage of that's at bargain basement prices because some of their competitors overexpanded and now are going under. They're going bankrupt, or they're just in a weak economic position, and they decide to sell the business. And that's when you can pick up assets at 50 cents, 40 cents, 30 cents on the dollar, or even less. So that's why Warren Buffett just sold a whole bunch of Apple stock and is sitting with his company Berkshire Hathaway with nearly $300 billion in cash. So he's going to be looking to buy stock in the not too distant future when stock prices are more of a value to him than they are today.
It's interesting about him because I would say that it's not so much that he's a brilliant man. It's just that he seems to do the right thing most of the time. I don't know if that's one of the same. I have no idea. But okay, what was I going to ask you? Oh, about the fact that you were talking about the Federal Reserve. So in this particular instance, is the problem the Federal Reserve or the president or the Biden administration?
Well, it's both, because Biden and Trump increased the debt from 19 billion or 20 billion to 35 billion. I mean, the spending spree the last 8 years under Trump and Biden have been just mind-boggling. And Trump is no fiscal conservative.
No,
he did these stimulus programs in 2020 because of the initial lockdowns that he did, and then the states did the lockdown. So the federal government just spent trillions of dollars propping up the economy because of all the lockdowns and business closures that occurred. And Biden just continued that program in 21 and 22, and now you've had the highest inflation in 40 years. When inflation reached 9% 2 years ago, it's winding down a little bit, but still prices are going up that the average person pays. They're still going up at double-digit rates from a year ago, and so the average person knows that they're falling further and further behind because of government mismanagement. And that's the point I want to make, Jim. Government cannot manage the economy. Just leave the economy to the entrepreneurs, the men and women who go to the office, who go to the mom and pop shop on Main Street and do what they do best, which is provide goods and services for the American people. All government can do is mess that process up with regulation and high taxes, and of course the Federal Reserve with cheap interest rates. So that's why.
But Murray,
let me just point this out, Jim. Your viewers can get the best book on money and banking from the Mises Institute for free, called "What Has Government Done to Our Money?" It was published more than 60 years ago, and I read it 50 years ago when I was a graduate student. And the ideas in that book became the basis of my doctoral dissertation at Rutgers in the 1970s about how inflation spreads through the economy. But this is the best introduction to money and banking, and it just shows you how money and banking evolves in an economy, and how central banking messes this whole process up. And that's why we have inflation. We have boom bust cycles.
We'll put a link for that on our blog, because I'm going to order the book myself. But okay, but here's my question though. All right, if I might just reveal myself as a total ignoramus here, but I have to, because I really have to ask this question. Doesn't somebody have to control the printing of money?
No. That's the greatest fallacy there is.
Yeah,
people think that money has to be a government policy or a government program. Rothbard points out in this little monograph that money is an organic concept, that it comes from the market because people decide what money is. In the old days, it was silver and gold, and then governments took over the issuance of money by taking in the gold and issuing notes, and then the banks issued banknotes, and that's why we had banking panics throughout the 19th century, because banks would issue more notes than they had gold or silver in reserve. That caused a boom in different communities around the country. And then they had the attempt at central banking in the United States that Rothbard talks about in his other book, The Mystery of Banking. And so these were all failures. Money is a service, if you will, just like cable and other services that we purchase in the free market. And if we had, and historically, people chose gold and silver because you can't counterfeit it. It's high value per unit. It's portable. It's virtually indestructible, and it has all the qualities that you read in the economic textbooks about what money should be. And paper money is an oxymoron. Paper is not money. It's a money substitute. It reflects the money, the actual gold that's in the vault of the bank. So a banknote is a claim to the gold or silver that's in the bank. And so when banks created more notes than they had gold and silver, people got nervous because they saw prices going up in the community, and they would try to get their gold or silver out, and people would rupture the bank, hence the term bankruptcy. And if you remember that famous scene at the end of It's a Wonderful Life, where people were running on this Bailey Savings and Loans because they wanted to get their money out. And what did George Bailey, the banker, say? Well, your money isn't here. It's tied up in mortgages. So the banks have a big problem. They borrow short from the public with checking accounts and savings accounts, but they make long-term loans. And so that's another problem of the banking system that Rothbard talks about in What Has Government Done to Our Money and The Mystery of Banking. So it's all explainable by economists who understand the nature of money, the nature of banking, and how so-called fractional reserve banking is harmful to sustainable prosperity and helps cause the business cycle. So all these things are available if people take the time and read What Has Government Done to Our Money, my book, Navigating the Boom Bust Cycle, and other books that are out there at the Mises.org website, because it's a wonderful resource for people who want the fundamentals about the economy and what can go wrong. And what can go wrong is war, pestilence, bad weather, but that's not something the government can combat. These are natural phenomena that occur. And if we had the government taking its hands off the economy would reflect the preferences of people. That's a simple concept. In other words, we all have different values and preferences. We go into the marketplace and try to satisfy our needs in the marketplace.
Yeah.
So we have e-commerce, we have the mom and pop stores, we have the big box stores. This is how wonderful the U.S. economy is, and it would be much better if we didn't have a $7 trillion budget, a $35 trillion national debt, and the Federal Reserve manipulating interest rates in order to have a good economic outcome, when the best economic outcome will come about by the Fed not manipulating interest rates and not trying to manage the financial markets with its policies.
But I do have to ask about this. So the thing is, I mean, I totally get everything you're saying, but still, okay, our paper money is, like you said, is representative of actual gold or silver, right? But we're not going to carry around gold and silver anymore. We're not.
Right.
So somebody still has to print the money, right? I mean,
no, what you have, just think of your car.
How would this work? How would this work in daily life?
Well, you would put your gold and silver, whether it's bars or coins, in the vault, or you could carry around. I mean, a 1 ounce gold coin is now worth $2,500. I mean, you could carry that around, but it's, or you could put it in the bank vault, and you'd get a checking account. I mean, that you don't carry around money. People use plastic as long as you'd have gold and silver being transferred from you, the purchaser, to the entrepreneur, the business owner. So all the banks would be doing would be transferring the money from different accounts.
Right.
So
okay, that makes sense.
That wouldn't be a problem at all. We do the same thing now, except we don't have anything backing the dollar now. We just have the promise that people will accept the dollar and the government will accept the dollars for payment in taxes. But otherwise, if we had the dollar defined, Jim, remember, in 1792, the dollar was defined as 1/20th of an ounce of gold. In other words, the dollar was not a thing in and of itself, but it represented a unit of gold. In that case, it was 1/20th of an ounce of gold. And that ratio stood until Roosevelt devalued the dollar to 1/35th of an ounce of gold in 1933 when he took office, in order to boost the economy during the Great Depression. So again, this is all easily understood if people took the time to understand. Gold is money, paper is a money substitute, a checking account is a money substitute. That's all you need to know. If people understood that, then money and banking become very, very simple. Then the question becomes, how do banks make money? Just as the way they make money today, they lend out money to entrepreneurs, to corporations, and it would issue CDs, a 3-month CD, a 6-month CD, a 5-year CD, or a 10-year CD, just as corporations issue bonds for capital formation, for capital investment. They issue a 1-year bond, 3-year bond, 5-year bond, 30-year bond. And that's how the financial system and the banking system would work. If we had sound money in banking, we would have no inflation. In fact, we would have a wonderful phenomenon called natural deflation, where prices would go down on average every year as more goods are produced and the money supply stays roughly stable.
I've been talking about crypto in his talks with you for quite a while. I'm starting to think, for 20 years, I thought it was complete bullshit. Now I'm starting to come around. I'm thinking, well, maybe it's just a place to park your money, in the sense of kind of like, I mean, what you're talking about. And if you're going to kind of transfer the concept of money to a unit of labor or creativity, is this sound?
Well, this is the debate is still ongoing.
What do you think, you personally?
Well, I have mixed feelings about it, because what is it based upon? It's based upon people just bidding up crypto or selling crypto, and the prices have been very volatile. So it's not. So one of the characteristics of money is that the purchasing power of the money doesn't change from day to day, week to week, month to month. It's, and I'm going to use the term, relatively stable. Crypto prices are just all over the place. So the question is, how does crypto become a money? And one of the ways something becomes money, if it's generally accepted as a medium of exchange. Crypto doesn't have that doesn't have that characteristic today. It's basically a store of value, and as we've seen, it can go down precipitously and it can go up substantially. So
my problem has been that it's intrinsically worthless. There's nothing. It's nothing, literally.
Well, that's why the dollar at one time meant that you could get gold for it.
Right.
And on the old gold notes, it said payable on demand something in real money at the Federal Reserve or the bank.
Yeah.
So at one time, the bank, the Federal Reserve notes had the notion that you could redeem it. It said redeem in lawful money. Lawful money was gold and silver. Like we had silver certificates and we had gold certificates.
Yeah. I remember silver certificates. I think that went out in the late 50s, if I'm right, or something like that.
64.
64, yeah. And so, there was the same thing. It was literally worth a certain amount of silver, the
It
certificate.
used to be 1 ounce of silver.
Yeah, right. Yeah, amazing. Well, what do you think is going to happen here with the economy? Do you think we're going to is this major recession going to hit here before the end of the year?
Well, right now it's sort of a slow motion that the recession, I believe, has begun because the unemployment rate goes up. And from the data I've looked at, once the unemployment rate starts rising, it's gone from 3.4% to 4.3%. That means companies are cutting back on labor, obviously, and they're cutting back. They'll be cutting back on production as they realize that there's not enough demand for the output that they think they can produce in order to meet consumer needs. So this is an ongoing process. Some industries are doing quite well. Some industries are hanging on. AI obviously is the big phenomenon now. Biotech is doing relatively well with the introduction of new drugs. Some of the leisure companies are doing quite well. Some of the retailers are having a difficult time. The auto companies are finding it difficult because they've loaded up on electric vehicles, another government intervention.
Right.
And the American people do not want electric vehicles the way the government thinks they should have. That's another example of a mandate shoved down the throat of the American people, with states mandating that they have X amount of percent of their vehicles sold in their state electric. Well, if the people don't want it, what are you going to do? And they're not as reliable as gas combustion engines. So again, mandates, coercion, massive regulation does not increase prosperity or wealth. We just have to get back to this simple notion: let entrepreneurs do what they do best, which is meet consumer demand. And unfortunately, the people in Washington don't believe that, or very few of them believe in that. And that's why we have the size of government that we do. They think they can manage the economy with taxing, spend, and regulation and printing money.
There's the world history is full of people who think they can manage the economy, and the real problem, and I've said this before, that is, I think the idea of the invisible hand is highly counterintuitive. It seems like magic, but it does totally work. But people can't buy it because, like, well, who's controlling it? And so the answer is nobody, and people just have an intrinsically hard time with that concept, just generally.
Well, the way I would argue with someone like that is I would say to the people, when you turn on your computer in the morning, do you find out what the White House wants you to do that day, that week, that month? Or do you go about your business because you have values and preferences that you want to achieve? So if it's good for you not to get government mandates, isn't it great for the whole economy where people are free to choose what they want to do in life as opposed to the government telling them what to do? And it comes in healthcare, it comes into education, housing. I mean, all the areas where the government is heavily involved, Jim, are very expensive and getting less and less quality. Whether
That's
it's
a fantastic analogy. That's terrific. It really is. I tell you what, let's leave it at that, okay?
I appreciate it, Jim.
I
So,
really appreciate it too, and really, congratulations on 75 years in the United States. That's pretty cool.
well,
So,
I'll leave you with one last concept. When I came to America, and then I became a U.S. citizen in 1959. So a couple of months ago was the 65th anniversary of becoming a U.S. citizen. There's this, what people think is a social contract. So when I became a citizen, I swore to uphold the Constitution. And if you look at the federal government's activities since 1949, 1959, the federal government has turned its back on what it's supposed to do and not do according to the Constitution. So
absolutely.
so the federal government has basically rescinded on the contract, the so-called social contract that I entered to when I became a U.S. citizen and came to America with my parents and older brother. So that's the problem I have with what's going on, is that the federal government has basically turned the world upside down since came to America. And I have a lot of problems with that, to say the least, namely that we have less freedom, we have less ability to achieve our goals. But the point I keep on making, Jim, is there still is enough freedom for, if people have a good idea, they can do well in America. And we've seen this over the last 30, 40 years with companies that came out of nowhere. Look at Bill Gates and Microsoft, Steve Jobs and Apple, Michael Dell and Dell, and Lululemon. I mean, Nike. I mean, the list goes on of companies that were developed by young people in the 1960s and 70s and 80s and 90s, and have become and Amazon. Look at Amazon and NVIDIA and all these great companies that have become multi-trillion-dollar companies because they have something that people want and improve their lives. So that's what America should be all about 24/7. But people are spending so much time on politics because they think politics is the answer, and politics is not the answer. It's just the opposite of what we need. We need less politics and more economic freedom.
God bless you. That's absolutely correct. Thank you for saying that. I really, seriously, I will speak for the viewers. We appreciate it. And I wanted to touch on one more thing too about you were saying, the problem is that people don't look into some of the stuff. God knows we have such busy lives. I mean, frankly, Murray, we depend on people like you to give us guidance on stuff like this because, I mean, you've spent a whole lifetime studying this. And there's, even if I wanted to now, I couldn't catch up, So
well, that's why the division of labor is such an important economic concept. We can't do everything. That's why I have a laptop. I don't know how to put a laptop together. I have a cell phone. I have AirPods. I have all these things at my disposal, and I earn money and save money in order to buy these things. And that's the beauty of a free market economy. And the really dumb people are in Washington making policy because if they understood it, Jim, the budget of the United States would be a fraction of what it is today. They wouldn't be printing money. They wouldn't be telling businesses how to run their operations.
Yeah.
We would have free trade internationally, so the benefits of free markets would spread throughout the world. Instead, you have people running for office telling us how great they're going to be in more government activities. We don't need more government activities. We need the government to get out of the way so free people can exercise their judgments and their values and preferences and achieve their goals without coercion from the government.
I would argue that that's largely a psychological thing because a lot of people just have a need to control other people, but that's probably a discussion for another time.
Absolutely.
So look, I'll talk to you when we're done here, but yeah, we'll put the link to the free book from Mises on our blog, and I'll also put links to your books up once again too. So
much, Jim. Appreciate it.
I appreciate it too. I can't tell you I appreciate everything you're trying to do, Murray, and you're succeeding at it. And God bless you, because I can't understand it. so it's like you are doing God's work as far as I'm concerned. So thanks so much. We'll talk to you soon. Thank you. That's Murray Sabrin. He is the Professor Emeritus of Economics at Ramapo College in New Jersey, and he's also the founder of the Sabrin Institute for Free Enterprise there, too. He's the author of, I think, about 7 books. And we'll put them all on our show blog. And also this book he was talking about, that the Mises Institute. Now, the Mises Institute is an institute. It's basically, I hope he won't hate me for saying this. It's a think tank for economics, basically. And I can't remember where it's based. But it's one of the biggest ones for economics in the United States. And Mises himself, that's, is it Lionel Mises? Was a famous German or Viennese economist. I can't remember. What do I know? You watch your show for the guests. Hell, I watch it for the guests. Now, normally this would be part 3 here, and we're going to tell you some goofy UFO news, but we're going to have so much of that tomorrow night when Martin Willis comes on. He's the founder and host of the podcast UFO podcast, which has been running since 2011. 13 years he's been doing this podcast. He does it every week, Tuesday nights. It's live, and like this show, it's live freaking everywhere. That's you can do audio, video. You know, they have something called Dualcast. It's on a digital radio station. Excuse me. Oh dear, that's terrible. That's terrible. I'm yawning. Well, of course, it is one time. It's 11:26 here in Minneapolis. So yeah, I guess I have used it. Well, my point is, we're not going to do the part 3 tonight because you're going to have plenty of it tomorrow. So we'll just leave it at that. I want to thank Murray Sabrin. I want to thank Jeff Meyer for coming by. I want to thank you for watching and listening wherever you are. Good night, Esperanza. Good night, Uncle Donnie. And good night to you wherever you may be. I'll see you tomorrow night. Take care, everybody.